What's the point of the economy? There are a lot of complex ways to answer that, but essentially, the economy is an efficient way of distributing resources. We all need things and we all have things, even if all we have is our labor. We trade our labor or our goods for currency, and in turn, trade currency for goods or services. That's what the economy is, but what's its point? Not many people think about that question. In fact, few people give economic matters much thought at all. We leave it up to the experts. Leaving it up to the experts is a subject for a podcast in itself, but here I'll try to quickly demystify economics. First, you need to understand that there are two types of economists, econometricists and what one might call theory economists. I'll summarize as best I can. Econometrics is essentially meteorology applied to the movement of the economy. Econometricists measure and study the market, creating endless charts and statistics with the hope of being able to predict future trends. What I call theory economics is more rightly understood as a branch of philosophy. Theory economists look at not just the direct causes of market changes, but also at the ultimate causes. They also study the effects of the economy in reference to quote-unquote non-economic factors like justice, human rights, and equality. Heretical stuff, I know. To bring it back to the weather analogy, the econometricists can predict if it will rain or not tomorrow, where the economists seek to understand what factors cause climate change and how. National banks are full of econometricists analyzing the market, trying to rein in inflation and promote robust growth, without ever questioning whether robust growth is a good thing or seeking to halt the root cause of inflation. That's not their fault. The decisions about how much and what types of growth we should be seeking, or what restrictions we should be placing on speculation, are policy decisions that should be made by our politicians and by us. But we've abdicated our responsibility in this area for a host of reasons I'll discuss in another episode. In this episode, I'm going to focus on dispelling some economic myths. Do we really need robust growth? Immanuel Kant was a philosopher who created what he called the categorical imperative. The categorical imperative states that one should act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. That's a little confusing, but it's really just a fancy way of saying the golden rule. Do unto others. This is an ethical model, and in my opinion it's the best one we've ever come up with, but we don't apply it to our economic actions. Why not? Because it's advantageous to wealthy power players to act against the public good, and they have successfully hidden their selfish motive behind a deliberate or foolish misinterpretation of Adam Smith's invisible hand of the market. Adam Smith is the father of modern economic theory, and like most fathers, he is hero-worshipped and poorly understood by his children. The invisible hand of the market was Smith's idea that whatever we do for our own benefit in the economy will directly or indirectly benefit everyone else. Basically, no matter how selfish we are, the result will be the betterment of all. Smith had a fairly compelling argument for this. I want to make lots of money, so I work hard and start a widget factory, which seeks to make the best widgets for the lowest prices. The public can then buy my widgets and thus have better widgets for a lower price. Sounds great. The thing is that according to Smith, the invisible hand only works when certain controls are placed on the market. For instance, all products and services must have intrinsic worth. I've spoken about advertising already, and it's a pretty good example of a service without intrinsic worth, but there are many other examples. He has over a dozen such provisos, including that the wealth of a nation must not be allowed to flow beyond its borders. A good book to read on this is The Cancer Stage of Capitalism by John McMurdy, or Smith's own work, The Wealth of Nations. Those wealthy power players have a tendency to firmly grapple onto the idea of the invisible hand while ignoring Smith's qualifications. That's how we've ended up with our current international trade model. They do this for the same reason they commission endless reports and analyses from the econometricists, not to determine the best policy, but to justify the policies that personally benefit them. Another of Smith's restrictions, by the way, is that wealthy individuals or groups shouldn't be allowed to lobby the government for their own benefit. They use the data from econometricists to play off our abdication to expertise to convince us that they have sound theoretical basis for policies which benefit them. Let's examine how their streamlined invisible hand, free of all restrictions, I call it the free hand, compares to Kant's categorical imperative in regards to robust growth. The free hand says that if I'm benefiting by growth, then everyone is benefiting, so continuous growth will equal continuous benefit. Applying the categorical imperative to this requires us to determine the maxim being employed. The maxim would seem to be, we will pursue growth through personal advantage indefinitely by any means. How would this maxim stand up as a universal law? Not well. First, we have finite resources. We can't grow forever, so the maxim is self-contradictory. Second, by having a laissez-faire attitude towards the effect of our actions, we invite unintentional harms, such as the environmental degradation and social injustices we're seeing now. Third, and most importantly, by pursuing growth by any means, we are forced to commit acts in violation of other ethical precepts, which is exactly what the structure of corporations compel them to do. For more on that, watch the Canadian documentary The Corporation. I've been reading about the European crisis of shrinking populations. This is only an economic crisis if we hold robust growth in all sectors as a good in itself. So what's a better maxim? How about we will hold our economic decisions to the same ethical standards we hold all other decisions? Universally applied, I think this works rather well. What does it do for robust growth? First, we can't expand our economy indefinitely. Our resources are finite, so ethically we must limit our growth to sustainable levels. Second, we should always be conscious of the effects of our actions, lest we destroy our future and thus destroy the system. Third, part of Kant's second ethical formulation states that all rational beings must be treated never as mere means, but as the supreme limiting condition in the use of all means. Thus, any means which create growth at the cost of human dignity are unethical, so any means necessary clearly cannot stand. Environmentalism is an ethical issue. Seventh generational thinking is essentially the categorical imperative applied to the environment over a long period of time. It is unethical to undertake any endeavor which, if universally undertaken, would destroy everyone and thus disallow the undertaking from being continued. With this in mind, I think that the goal of the economy should be to drive our society towards that point way up there on my chart from my first episode, that point called Utopia. What actions are our society taking that are in violation of this maxim? There's a whole bunch, and I'm going to be dissecting them throughout a number of episodes. I'll start here with robust growth by making some clarifications on that point. We do need more growth. That's evident by the fact that there is poverty in the world. But the growth that most people talk about doesn't seek to eliminate poverty. It seeks to increase the GDP. I mentioned in passing the connection between speculation and inflation, and this needs to be spoken about here. All speculation is theft, and it is the root cause of inflation. You buy a house for $50,000. 10 years later, you see that its worth on the market has grown to $100,000. You think, great, I'm $50,000 richer. But it's the same house it was 10 years ago. In fact, it's older. You haven't profited. When you go to buy another house, it's more expensive than it would have been 10 years ago. What's caused the inflation in price? Real estate speculation. Speculators buy a house in high-demand areas, sit on it as the price goes up, then quickly sell it for a profit. But the catch-22 is that by buying that house, they are increasing the demand and driving up the prices. It's cyclical, because people then rush to buy houses out of fear that the price will continue to grow up, which actually raises the prices further, and so on. This continues until the prices become so high that no one can afford the houses anymore, and the market takes a downturn, at which point the prices start to drop, and the house you just bought for $200,000 is only worth $150,000. Of course, by this point, the speculators have moved on with their massive profits in hand, and regular folks are left paying grossly inflated mortgages. The same thing essentially happens on the stock market, but that's a topic for another episode. To pay these mortgages, the regular folks raise the price of their goods, which slowly filters down until everything is more expensive, but the only people really benefiting are the speculators who are unethically manipulating the market. But don't think it's just the speculators, it's the banks and the government too. The banks benefit by real estate speculation because the bigger the mortgage, the bigger the amount of interest they're paid. The government keeps these practices legal because they are terribly afraid of being blamed for the economic downturn that would ensue if the value of our homes stopped growing. That's the same reason they're afraid of shrinking populations in Europe. It's that they don't understand that if the dollar value of a house stops growing or even goes down, then more of us will be able to buy houses and the quality of our lives will be increased at the cost of the GDP. The only people who would be hurt are the real estate speculators who, going back to Adam Smith, aren't in an industry which creates intrinsic worth. My solution to the speculation problem will come in my next video. I know my ideas aren't perfect, don't shoot me down, make suggestions. My name is Colin Jones and I want things to get better.